love a hearty traditional lasagna? If the answer to that is yes, you are going to love this hearty lasagna soup. So let's get cooking and make some hearty lasagna soup. Delicious on a cool winter evening or any time of year. We're going to start by using we're going to start by using a plant-based protein. I'm using Beyond Beef. I've used sausage. I've used half sausage, half beef. I've used plant-based sausage. What you need is about a pound of protein, whether it's plant-based or animal-based. We're going to go ahead and brown up our plant-based protein now. I'm using a meat masher here to kind of mash it up a little bit. It helps break it up. You could use a wooden spoon. I like to use the meat masher. Then once it's broken up, I go ahead and usually use a spoon to kind of brown it up. We're going to go ahead and just brown that up. Our plant-based Beyond Beef is nicely browned now, and we're going to go ahead and add 1 medium onion that's diced and 3 cloves of roasted garlic. You can use fresh garlic if you add the fresh. I just have roasted garlic, so I'm using it. If you don't have roasted garlic and you just have fresh garlic, cook your onions first until they're soft. Then add in your fresh garlic, minced fresh garlic, and cook for like another minute or so until they're fragrant. So we're going to cook these onions and roasted garlic in the Beyond Beef burger here for probably about 3 to 4 minutes until they're nice and soft. Once the onions are soft and that garlic is nice and fragrant, we're going to add 28 ounces or a 28 ounce can of crushed tomatoes. I'm actually adding 32 ounces of my home canned Italian style tomatoes instead. I have them, I can them, I grew them in my garden, they're all organic, and so I love to use them in my cooking. If you want to know how to can tomatoes, make your own homemade broth, go to my website at growwithdrjoannette.com. So in addition to the tomatoes, I'm now adding a quart of my homemade vegetable broth to the soup, and we're going to let that simmer up. I also make homemade chicken broth. In fact, you can see here on the stove, I've got a couple of kettles in the back row. One of them is chicken stock and the other one is beef stock. They were the leftovers from the holiday cooking, and I made them into delicious beef and chicken stock. So I also save all of my vegetable scraps and make vegetable stock as well for my vegetarian type dishes, like this one. So that is my simple is smart tip for this recipe. Make your own ingredients as much as possible. If you're fortunate enough to have a garden and grow organic vegetables, can them, freeze them, preserve them, turn them into things that you can use in your recipes. It's healthier and you know exactly what's in your recipe. Make your own homemade beef stock or chicken stock or even vegetable stock from what you grow in your garden. We're going to go ahead now and put a lid on this and just let it simmer on the stove while we cook up the lasagna. Instead of adding ricotta cheese to the soup, I am making ricotta cheese gnocchi that we will add to the soup. Basically, it's just lots of cheese, some Parmesan, lots of ricotta cheese, some Parmesan, and flour. So while our soup is simmering, let's go ahead and make our ricotta gnocchi and go ahead and cook up our lasagna noodles. I almost forgot, before we get the soup simmering, we need to add some seasoning, some herbs to our soup. Here's my second simple smart tip. If you like to cook with fresh herbs and you don't live in an area where they grow year-round, harvest them at their peak during their growing season, put them in a Ziploc bag in your freezer, and then use them as a fresh herb in your cooking. This is basil that I'm adding to the soup. I'm also adding some Italian seasoning, about 2 teaspoons there, and I'm going to add just a tiny bit of red pepper flakes. The parsley, or the basil, I added probably a little, maybe a small to medium handful of the crushed frozen basil leaves. You don't want to leave your fresh herbs out very long though, because they do defrost rapidly, so you want to get them back in the fridge as quickly as possible. But this is a great way to cook with fresh herbs all year round if you can't find them in the market or they aren't readily available otherwise. So we're going to stir that in, and now we're going to go ahead and put it on the stove, cover it up, and let it simmer. Ah, it's smelling delicious already. Put this over here, and we'll move it to the stove now. I'm going to be using this in lasagna soup. However, I wanted to also show it to you as a how-to recipe. So this is how to make ricotta gnocchi. You could use it in lasagna soup, you could fry it in a little butter, use it many different ways, put it in a tomato sauce, however you want to use it. So let's get cooking and make some ricotta gnocchi for our lasagna soup. If you want to make a full batch of gnocchi, you want to double the recipe that I am using here. I cut the recipe that I normally make in half because I don't need so many of the gnocchi for our lasagna soup. I started by removing some of the excess moisture from the whole fat ricotta. You want to use whole fat ricotta, not low fat or non-fat ricotta. For this recipe, you need the whole fat ricotta. And I started with 1/2 pound of whole fat ricotta and put the ricotta cheese on a paper towel, put another paper towel over the top of it, and gently patted it to remove a lot of the moisture from it. The weight of the ricotta before I removed the moisture was about 8 ounces. Now it weighs about 6 ounces. So if you're doubling the recipe, you'll start with 16 ounces and you'll end up with about 12 ounces. I'm going to go ahead and put it here in my bowl. To that, I'm going to add an egg. You could add 2 egg yolks instead of a whole egg, if you wanted to. And let's get it. And in addition to the 1 egg, I'm adding 1/2 cup of freshly grated Parmesan and 1/2 cup of flour. And we're going to mix this up. In fact, I like to just use my hands because I'm going to be using my hands to make the gnocchi anyway. So I just mix this all up with my hands. Sometimes it ends up being a little on the soft side, a little softer than I want. So I may add a little extra flour to it to get it a consistency that I can roll out into little logs of gnocchi. It does look a little on the soft side. Maybe I didn't get enough of the moisture out. And also sometimes you end up with a little bit bigger of an egg that also will make it a little moister than you want. So we're going to get a little more flour for it here. And I'm going to start with, the other thing I do want to add is I want to add a little salt as well. You're gonna cook it in probably about a half of a teaspoon of salt here. You're gonna cook it in salted water, so that it'll pick up some salt from there as well. But I like to add about a half of a teaspoon of salt, and I'm adding probably a couple of tablespoons more of flour to our gnocchi mix to give it a little drier consistency. That's better. Still a little on the soft side. Maybe another couple of tablespoons. So that would be about an extra quarter of a cup that I actually added. Sometimes that happens, you know, it ends up not kind of being the consistency you want, so you've got to make adjustments as you go along. There we go, that's much better. So it actually makes a fair amount of gnocchi. Flour our board here. I also like to flour my bench knife as well as my gnocchi board. If you don't have a gnocchi board, that's fine. You can just make what I call little gnocchi pillows. So you're going to take about that much dough there. So you want to take like about this much of your gnocchi dough, and you're going to roll it into a nice, what I call gnocchi log. It's pretty soft. If you need to, you can, it may kind of squishes a little bit. You may need to add a little bit more flour. This seems to be working fairly well in getting it rolled out. You want it to be probably about a half of an inch, maybe a little thicker. It doesn't have to be exact. And then what you're going to do is I'm going to just cut it in the middle here so you can see both pieces. You're going to just cut it into what I call little gnocchi pillows. And they are about a half, well, probably 3/4 of an inch to an inch or thereabouts. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. If your bench knife starts sticking a little bit, just dip it in the flour. And you could just cook the gnocchi like this. No, would not be anything wrong with that. They'd be delicious. And if you're fortunate enough to have a gnocchi board, put a little flour on your board and create that tradition. I'm going to move these out of the way so you can see it. Create that traditional gnocchi shape by, I'm going to just try that again, rolling them down the board, just like that. It takes a little bit of practice to get that technique down, but once you get it down, it's very easy, and you end up with some lovely gnocchis to fry up, to put in soup, sometimes I'll cook them with a little roasted squash and browned butter. That's delicious. Oops, we got one more there. And once they're made, I like to add them to a parchment-lined baking sheet and put that parchment-lined baking sheet usually in the refrigerator until I'm ready to cook them. I'll keep them in the refrigerator up to a day after that. If I'm gonna wait longer than that before I use them, I'm going to go ahead and just freeze them on the parchment sheet, put them in a vacuum pack type bag, freeze them, put them in a vacuum bag, freeze them in that, once they're frozen, vacuum pack that bag, and it's good in your freezer for 6 months or even longer. I've taken it out of the freezer after a year when it's been vacuum packed and it's still been delicious. So go ahead and finish up that gnocchi, and then we're going to check on our soup and see what's going on with our soup. So I've about 8 or 10 lasagna noodles here that I've cut up or broke up into kind of bite-sized pieces. We're going to add them to some salted boiling water here and cook them up so they will be done and ready to add to our lasagna. While they're cooking, we're also going to go ahead and cook our ricotta. We're also going to go ahead and cook our ricotta gnocchi. Get all of those added to the boiling water. I'm going to give it a little stir, and I'm going to move it over to the stove behind us so that we can move the kettle over here so you can see me cook the ricotta gnocchi. I'm going to go ahead and add some gnocchi to our water here. And you want to do it in, you want to cook them in small batches. For what we have here, I'll probably cook it in about 3 batches or so. And you just let it cook. It doesn't take very long to cook, a few minutes, and as soon as the gnocchi have all floated to the top of the water, you can go ahead and take them out and they are cooked. You can see them starting to float up to the top of the water now. In fact, most of them have pretty much floated up. I'm going to go ahead and start scooping out the ones that are floated up. I like to just let them drain a little bit in the strainer. And we're going to go ahead and put them in a bowl here. And one more there. And as soon as your water's boiling again, which mine is, go ahead and add your second batch or third batch, or however many batches you end up having. That parchment paper, I doubled it over. It's kind of making it a little bit difficult to get those gnocchi into the kettle, but we got it done. So our lasagna soup is nearly finished, but we need a little ricotta and mozzarella. It wouldn't be lasagna without a little mozzarella in it. And what we're going to do is I'm mixing these together. This is grated half a cup of ricotta cheese and a half a cup of grated mozzarella. I'm going to mix these together and we're going to put like a little dollop on top of our soup when we serve it. Little scoop. So we got that all mixed up here, ready to go. So let's bring over the soup. So we're going to finish our soup by adding a little heavy cream, about 1/4 cup. If you want, you can add a little more. If you don't want to add dairy, you can use coconut cream. That works just as well. I've used both. Both of them are delicious. I'm going to stir that in. And our soup is ready to serve. But before we serve it, let's talk about our Neuronutrition Nugget. The star of this soup is tomatoes, and tomatoes are a great source of neuronutrition for your brain. They have 2-star antioxidants, lycopene as well as beta-carotene. Both of these antioxidants are important for destroying free radicals. Remember, free radicals are those substances in our brain as well as our body that create inflammation and lead to cognitive decline, and even have been implicated in Alzheimer's and other dementia type of cognitive decline, neurodegenerative type diseases. So adding tomatoes is a great way to help protect your brain against oxidation and oxidative stress. In addition, if you pair the tomatoes with an oil, olive oil is a great one. Today we did use olive oil in our recipe. So you pair the tomatoes with olive oil and they have a synergistic effect. The olive oil helps the brain take up the carotenoids, which is the lycopene and the beta-carotene in the tomatoes. So when you add olive oil to the tomatoes, you get a synergistic effect. In other words, the olive oil helps the tomatoes take up, in other words, the olive oil helps the brain take up the substances, the carotenoids, the lycopene, the beta-carotene, that are so important for protecting our brain against oxidative stress. So today we're adding some tomatoes to our diet. We're helping our brain with the lycopene and the beta-carotene, and we're also adding some olive oil to help our brain be able to use both the beta-carotene and the lycopene. So to serve our soup, I like to put some of the lasagna, some of the gnocchi. Remember, this is our cheese. This is our ricotta cheese for our lasagna soup. I like to put, about a quarter of makes 4 servings. So I put about a quarter of the gnocchi in the bottom of the bowl. About a quarter of the lasagna noodles as well. And then I like to add the soup to that was probably not quite a quarter. We'll add a little more of the lasagna noodles here. And now I'm going to add the soup to the bowl. And a little dollop of our mozzarella with ricotta, and even a little fresh basil would be delicious. But there you have it, a delicious bowl of lasagna soup. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and thank you for clicking the like button, subscribing, as well as signing up for notifications so that you don't miss any of our delicious, nutritious, brain-healthy recipes to help you live a healthier, longer life. See you next time on the Dr. Gnocchi channel. Also, for more information, make sure you go to my website at growwithdrgnocchi.com, where you'll find the full recipe as well as lots of other great information about how to keep your brain as well as your body healthy.